In the wake of recent admissions by Uganda and in the absence of a final deportation plan, right-wing lawmakers in the coalition are now pushing to ratify an exemption or cessation clause. If passed, a majority of 61 Knesset members would then be able to overturn the High Court's decisions, for example, in matters such as the illegal deportation of African asylum seekers. Well, joining me now to discuss this further is editor-in-chief at Mida.org.il, Ziv Maor, and attorney Avi Rimon, who specializes in administrative law. Thank you both very much for coming in today. Now, for my first question, I'm going to turn to you, Ziv. It sounds like the courts are interpreting what is and isn't legal based on both Israeli and international law that Israel has signed on to, including, UN agreements about defining refugees and how to deal with them. That goes back all the way to the 1950s. So, isn't this type of law weakening Israel ultimately?
First of all, I do agree that this type of law weakening Israel, but for a very different reason. As for the question, there is no doubt that the verdict delaying the deportation is illegal, is not aligned with Israeli nor with international law, and this is basically leftist politics made by the court illegally. That's what it is. As for the cessation clause, I am also against it, but from a different reason. The court has stolen the right to legislate from the Israeli public, and it should give it back without any terms and without any conditions. I'm against the cessation clause because it says, okay, this right was stolen from the citizen, now let's negotiate the terms under which the court will gain some kind of legislation right now. Once we will have judges that will be appointed with any connection to the Israeli public. Once we have a valid constitution, then I will be willing to negotiate right for judges to legislate or to overthrow laws.
But so I'm going to turn it over. What then is the point of having a court if the Knesset will just overturn their decisions?
Well, I think in the constitutional structure of Israel, the power of the court to overrule laws by the Knesset is very essential. We must understand that the coalition in Israel is very powerful. The government is a proxy of the coalition in the Knesset. So the parliament in Israel is exceptionally powerful. There are no two houses of parliament as in many other countries. And in such a diverse society in Israel, with so many challenges, there is a great importance that there will be a body, a neutral body, which is not political, that can protect the basic human rights. Because these rights can be in jeopardy once in light of the power of the parliament.
So let's take that a step further. We'll take the slippery slope argument and we'll say this law, the possibility of it being abused. Let's say the coalition switches to a left-wing government and 10 years down the law, this law passes. And they say, okay, now we're going to use a 61 Knesset majority to push a string of left-wing laws. We're going to unilaterally withdraw from the West Bank, demolish any settlements, things like that. I mean, again, wouldn't you want the courts then?
You're not talking about the future, you're talking about the past. Just 13 years ago, this is more or less what happened. Now,
but wouldn't you want the courts then to be involved?
When the court, and when Avi here says that the court is, so to speak, neutral, this was a time was supposed to say, this is what I am, I protect human rights. When people of the Gaza Strip were stripped of their human rights and the court stood aside and did nothing with it, he lost the right to say, I'm neutral. The court in Israel is not elected and represents always the left. When rightists appeal to the court, they get no remedy whatsoever. When leftists they do whatever they want. This is the issue. The issue is, now when you say that the parliament in Israel and the government in Israel are powerful, you ignore one very important fact, that the court in Israel is the only branch of government that has got no restraints whatsoever. The checks and balances concept does not exist when it comes to the Israeli court.
How do you respond?
Well, the courts can rule upon a case that is brought to them. This is quite a limited power. They cannot initiate any law. They cannot initiate almost anything. They can rule whether this act is legal or not. So this is a very narrow power, which they can exercise almost up to its full extent. Yeah. But courts are part of the system. You know,
All right, well,
they have a great value and weight in the overall constitutional structure.
There is no constitutional structure without a constitution whatsoever.
all right, well, anyway, I have to cut it off there. I'm sorry, but thank you both very much for coming in today.